Look inside your heart and I look inside mine. Things look so bad everywhere. In this whole world, what is fair? We walk the line and try to see, falling behind what could be. Oh, oh, bring me a higher love. Bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love. Where's that higher love I keep thinking of? Bring higher love. Bring higher love. Bring Worlds are turning, and we're just hanging on, facing our fear and standing out there alone. I yearn, yeah, and it's real to me. There must be someone who's feeling for me. Things look so bad everywhere in this whole world. What is fair? We walk the line and try to see, falling behind, and what could be. Oh, bring me a higher love. I'm all up. Bring me a higher love.
Hey, are you on your phone?
Oh, your love. I keep thinking of.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Onward Together and Win the Era grassroots event. We are so excited to have you today. My name is Emmy Ruiz. I have joined you many times before to talk about the great work that Onward Together is doing. I'm a senior advisor for Onward Together. And today we're going to have this joint event with Mayor Pete's Win the Era that's doing incredible work across the country, supporting new candidates who are, helping us change the world. And so I'll start by telling you a little bit about today. I'm going to introduce the different members of today's conversation, including Michael Halley, who is a board member for Win the Era, and then we'll be accompanied by Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, Secretary Clinton, and Mayor Pete. Onward Together began immediately following the 2016 election. As you all will remember, we fought a really hard race and we're incredibly disappointed by the results. But it will also come as no surprise to any of you that Secretary Clinton would not accept things as they were and just look away. She continued the work that she has always done, supporting groups emerging, those that were coming into the resistance, groups like Indivisible, groups like Swing Left, Run for Something, as well as groups that have been around doing this critical work for many years. Groups like Emerge America, groups like Color of Change, the Collective PAC, Latino Victory, Voto Latino, and so on. And Secretary Clinton's Onward Together has been there every step of the way for our partner groups, now spanning 15 across the country. That includes work that is being done in critical states like Lucha in Arizona, Texas Civil Rights Project in Texas, Dream Big Nevada with Astrid Silva in Nevada. And that's work that we're incredibly proud of. As we look at this critical election year, to say that this is going to be a tumultuous election cycle, I think would be a tremendous understatement. And the work that Secretary Clinton is doing to fight for safe voting opportunities, for expansive voting opportunities, for the right to vote, along with Mark Elias with the democracy docket, is critical of that. And our work at Onward Together will continue supporting the work of our partners, ensuring that they have the resources needed to succeed in this once in a lifetime election cycle. We all know and acknowledge that democracy is truly on the line, and we're going to do everything we can. And we hope that those of you joining today, some of you that might be hearing about Onward Together for the first time, will join us in this effort. You can go to onwardtogether.org to learn more about our partner groups, to learn more about the critical work that they're doing, to join us in supporting them and support Onward Together. I'm going to pass it on to my longtime friend and colleague, also a Hillary for America colleague, Michael Halley, who's a board member for Win the Era. He'll tell us a little bit about the great work that they're doing, and then introduce Congresswoman Lauren Underwood.
Fantastic. Emmy, thank you. And I just want to say it's such an honor to be on with this group and with two people who I found to be the smartest, most thoughtful, and impressive people I've just been so lucky to work for, both Mayor Pete and Secretary Clinton. Both of those campaigns have been, honors of my lifetime, and getting to work with Emmy. So I'm excited and honored just to be able to kind of have any part of it. But I also did not want to miss the opportunity to kind of celebrate and talk a little bit about Win the Era and the amazing work. I think that the impetus for Win the Era was very similar to Secretary Clinton after the 2016 election. Huge group of people that were so enthusiastic about the mayor, and we wanted to really figure out how do we keep that energy going and really put it to the best use possible to make as much change and really kind of look to the future and how we're going to develop more candidates and really add to the movement, and special focus this year on ensuring that Donald Trump is not going to continue beyond. So when we thought about this, we really wanted to go all out for a group of candidates that represent some ideals that Pete demonstrated during our campaign. And we didn't want to just do this at the federal level. We want to do this at every level of government with young emerging leaders who are fighting for different elements that are so important for our democracy. This ranges from everything from local leaders, LeVar Stoney, who's the mayor of Richmond, to Jevin Hodge, who's running for the Maricopa supervisor. At the state level in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, who's the attorney general, Malcolm Kenyatta, both of whom are fighting hard and kind of representing a real new generation of leadership in Pennsylvania. And then, candidates like Congresswoman Underwood, who really are on the front lines in Congress and pushing for the changes we need to see in the country every day. And to speak a little bit about her, especially in this moment where healthcare and the impact of healthcare is so central to everyone's thinking every single day. Her background, both as a nurse and serving under President Obama at HHS, and I think we overlapped a little bit. I worked at HHS for the first year on the health reform bill, and I think you came in and did the important stuff afterward. But she is a perfect example of the types of candidates that we want to really get behind with Win the Era. Forward-looking, big plans, and really doing the hard work every day in Congress to make sure that we're moving the ball forward. And I'm so thrilled to have her on and moderating this tonight. And I'm going to kick it to her to kick things off.
Well, thank you, Emmy and Michael, for sharing a bit about the amazing work that you're doing with Onward Together and Win the Era. And a huge thank you to the over 2,000 people joining us tonight. These organizations and everyone on the call are doing all that we can to ensure that we see big change in our country at every level of the government. I'm honored to be endorsed and supported by both Mayor Buttigieg and Secretary Clinton, and grateful to see them both fighting every day for what's right. So I'm Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. I was elected in 2018 and became the first woman and person of color to represent my community in Congress. I'm also the youngest Black woman ever elected to the Congress. And I have a competitive election this year. Trump won my district in 2016. So I definitely understand what's at stake in this election. My opponent, he's a self-funding multimillionaire at a time when the American people want to get money out of politics. And let's just be real. People are hungry for change, looking to heal racial division, recover from COVID-19, and move our economy forward. People in my community are excited about health reform, which would lower their out-of-pocket costs, climate solutions that create clean energy jobs, and ending the culture of corruption. We have a lot of work to do together, which is why I'm so excited to hear from our special guests tonight. Both of these distinguished individuals need no introduction, but I'll start by introducing to you the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, former lieutenant in the Navy, the first openly gay person to win a presidential primary contest, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Over to you, Pete.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman Underwood. We are so proud to support you in your leadership. It has never been more important to have your voice, your insight, and your intellect in Congress. And we're just thrilled to be at your side in this. I'm so thrilled to be with just incredible company, everybody who has signed up to be part of this and everybody who helped make tonight's event a success. It's coming at such an important time. The middle of this year. Can you believe everything that's happened in 2020? That was just the first half of 2020. We've got a lot more coming our way. And if there's one thing that's become clear so far in these turbulent times, it's just how much leadership matters. And that's why we started Win the Era. When I stepped off the campaign trail, I wanted to make sure that I could continue to practice what we always preached, that not only was it critically important to make sure that Joe Biden is the next president of the United States and that we defeat Donald Trump, but that we can't ever treat the presidency like it's the only office that matters, that we've got to be supporting candidates up and down the ticket. But I won't go on that long because we are so honored and thrilled to be joined with our co-host this evening, who I have the honor of introducing. Hillary Clinton needs no introduction, our former First Lady, Senator from New York, Secretary of State, and we are reminded every day how much better off the country and the world would be if she were our president. And I think of her in my president in so many ways. She has served Americans throughout her life, stood up for women, for children, for everyone. And the example that she set has been one that so many in politics have followed. When I was trying to figure out how best to make myself useful, and make sure we took the toolkit and the community of supporters that we brought together and put it to work. One of the examples and role models I could look to is the way that Hillary Clinton has continued to lead when she is in office or on the ballot and beyond any election day. So that's why I was proud to vote for her in 2016, proud to be a delegate for her and work to get her elected, and so proud to be joined by her tonight. Secretary Clinton, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Pete, thank you so much. And it's a terrific honor and pleasure to be with you and to talk about the future, which you so wonderfully embodied and really tried to put at the center of your campaign during the last presidential primary. And I just have to say, Pete, that I admired your campaign. I admired how hard you tried to lift up the ideals and the values that are really at stake in our country. And I admired the way that you decided to leave the campaign and immediately endorse Vice President Biden. That showed real class and real leadership, and you have continued to demonstrate that. And now with Win the Era, you are continuing the work that you really started in your lifetime, not only in public service, but in military service and in so many other ways. So I'm really so delighted to be with you and to support the work you're continuing to do. And I am thrilled that we are going to be highlighting one of the terrific members of Congress. I was proud to support Lauren Underwood when she ran. At the beginning, people honestly didn't think that she could break through and win. But she had the stuff of what makes somebody both a good candidate and, as we have seen in the Congress, a very good public official. She's been at the center of so many of the important debates that the Democratic House has undertaken. She's been instrumental in sponsoring bills, writing bills, getting them passed, even getting them signed, because she came to Washington to serve the people who sent her there and to actually make a difference in their lives and the lives of so many Americans. So, as she said, this is not going to be an easy re-election, but I am very confident that with the help of all 2,000 people who are with us tonight and so many thousands more across the country and particularly in her district in Illinois, she'll be going back to Congress. And what we're doing tonight in supporting the two organizations that you heard about from Emmy and Michael is to send a very clear signal. You know, after the 2016 election, I was determined that we had to do more to support the next generation of leaders and organizations, and to include the extraordinary diversity that is part of the Democratic Party and part of our country. So when I started Onward Together, I wanted to reach out and find organizations that were doing work that is going to build the kind of winning coalitions that we need to elect Democrats and progressives up and down the ballot. Emmy named a few of them. I'm very proud of the work that we are doing. And we also support candidates. We support candidates by endorsing them and by funding their campaigns because we believe strongly that we have to have a pipeline chock full of talented, hardworking, effective candidates who then become the leaders for now and this new era. So when it was suggested that Onward Together and Win the Era come together, I thought it was absolutely the right decision, because on our side of the political ledger, we've got to do more to work together, to cooperate, to help highlight what's at stake in these elections. And so thank you to everybody who has made this event so successful. Thank you to Pete for having that vision that he took out of his campaign and has immediately put it to work. And thank you, Lauren, for putting yourself out there in 2018. Both Pete and I know a little bit about running for office and the challenges that it poses. But you have been a superb legislator, and I hope we get to talk a little bit now about some of the work you're doing and how those of us through our organizations and through our contributions can help you continue that work.
Well, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor Pete. Let's just get into the questions. Does everybody else have all the feels? You all have me pumped. So the three of us have our roots in the Midwest. And I love this first question from Paul in Oregon, but it's about the Midwest. He says, you're both Midwesterners by birth and upbringing, and you've both gone on to see and experience a lot in the world. What are the values with which you were raised that you share in common that have sustained you and helped tether you to the earth while enabling you to soar? Let's start with Secretary Clinton.
Well, it's a great question, Lauren, because I was born in Chicago. I was raised in the suburbs of Chicago, not too far from your district, as you know. And I am so grateful for my upbringing. You know, I went to really good public schools that the people of my community supported. I had a terrific opportunity through my public school education to, be encouraged to go as far as my hard work would take me. I had two extraordinary parents who instilled in me the ethic of hard work and also, though, of giving back. I was active in my church, the Methodist Church in Park Ridge, Illinois, where my horizons were expanded so that it was not just, my church and my suburban community, but working on projects with, kids in the inner city, looking to take care of the children of migrant workers when we used to have large farms still on the outskirts of Chicago. So hard work, a sense of responsibility and accountability, a commitment to trying to find ways of giving back. I feel so fortunate that I not only had the family that I did, but that family was rooted right there in the Midwest.
Amazing. Mayor Pete.
Yeah, I certainly think of myself as as a product of the Midwest, and continues to be my home. That groundedness that the Secretary spoke to, I think, is so important. The idea that no matter what high tables you find yourself dining at, or how far you get to go in life, a reminder from time to time that you didn't invent yourself, that you're part of a community where people look after each other, and that it's important to continue making yourself useful to those around you. Also, in this part of the Midwest, the so-called Rust Belt that went through a lot of economic shocks, a sense of hope and a need to relate the past, the present, and the future, understanding that we were never going to go back to the way things were when there were enormous factories here with tens of thousands of people working the way that they did in the 20s or in the 50s, but that didn't mean we had to give up, or even that we had to give up making things. We just had to find new ways to do it. And I think that spirit of innovation and that determination is something that really serves the whole country well. And I think more than anything else, a sensibility about the way you treat other people, and that when you have a different view from somebody, especially when you have a different view from somebody, that it's important to see the humanity and where they're coming from and try to meet them where they are. Something else I wish we had more of on all sides of the political spectrum right now.
That's right. And so, as a follow-up to that, a few people would ask what's on all of our minds, the pandemic. And so this question comes from Ruth in California and Angela in Portland. What immediate steps would either of you take if you had the power to change the pathway of COVID-19 pandemic that we're on, especially addressing how this disproportionately impacts women and people of color? Pete, you want to start?
Sure. Well, first of all, as the question captures, this is both exposing and exploiting the inequities in our country. And we are seeing that some of the most vulnerable Americans, including Americans of color, are both more likely to contract COVID, largely because they are in professions that were described in the past and compensated as disposable, but now told that they were essential. And made to go back to work, but also when contracting the disease, especially for Black patients, more likely to suffer the worst consequences. Not because the virus discriminates; it doesn't in itself notice any racial difference, but it is infecting people in a country that does, and that means everything from access to healthcare and health insurance to the ability to have lived in a place where there is access to healthy food, which affects the chances of getting diabetes, which in turn affects how vulnerable you are to the worst effects of COVID. All of these things are linked. And this needed to be a priority from day one, but I think could not have been further from the mind of this president, who seemed to believe that you could just wish this virus away. And unfortunately, that continues to be the closest thing he has to a strategy. This is one of those moments where we have got to listen to what science and medicine and also local officials have to say. And so if I had that magic wand, needless to say, a lot of things would be different. But above all, it would be the priorities and the approach and who is heard in that room, wherever it is, where the decisions are being made in Washington. Because right now, we saw it with mayors, we've seen it with governors, and now we're seeing it with school districts. The message to far too many people out here on the ground trying to figure it out is you're on your own.
I totally agree with what Pete said in analyzing the problem that we are facing. It's been just a total collapse of leadership from the top and a politicization of a disease that has, made it unfortunately the case that the United States leads the world in the number of infections, in deaths, and it's heartbreaking because the Obama administration left a set of guidelines about what to do in a pandemic. It's something I confronted when I was Secretary of State and we were dealing with H1N1. And there were protocols and there were all kinds of steps that we were supposed to go through. And this administration disregarded that, disbanded the unit within the National Security Council that was supposed to be on the lookout for the coming of disease. Everyone knew that it was likely to happen. When and from where and how might not have been known, but the fact that we would face another serious disease that could become a pandemic was pretty widely accepted, not just by disease specialists, but by national security specialists and others. So we are where we are right now, and it seems to me that if you could wave a magic wand, you would listen even to the experts that are being stifled by this administration, even some who they appointed themselves. The CDC has been marginalized, but the person they put in charge of the CDC recently said, if we would all, wear masks, if we would be socially distancing ourselves, if we would just be willing to take a couple of weeks to try to step out of the rush to resume normal life, these are his words, not mine, we could get this under control. And yet, we have huge arguments about wearing masks. We have governors like the governor of Georgia ordering communities like the city of Atlanta not to mandate masks. And for what reason, I can't understand, because it's only making the economic pain and dislocation worse, and unfortunately extending it. So it makes no sense other than it's something that this president doesn't want to deal with and wishes would go away and can't believe it hasn't, and is going to pretend that, he can just forge through a political campaign. So I think if you look around the world, we're not out of this by any means, but we do know more than we did 6 months ago about what we should be doing. We just don't have leadership from the top that models it and encourages it and requires it. So sadly, if Florida were an independent country, it would rank 4th in the world now in terms of the number of infections and the consequences, behind the United States, Brazil, and India. So yes, we know what we should be doing, and our politics is so dysfunctional, and our approach to this disease has been so unfortunately perverted by Trump and Pence and others that we are playing terrible catch up. And I don't know how many more people have to get sick and even die before we finally come to our senses. But let's hope it's not going to be as terrible as it could be.
That's right. And so we're in a moment where so many people are likely viewing us from a state or community that has these rising case rates. And just want to let y'all know that you're in our prayers. We hope that you continue to check in on your neighbors, and we will get through this together. We have a question from Robin in Downers Grove, Illinois, about running for president. Given both of your experiences campaigning for president, what are 1 or 2 changes to the process that you would like to see in how we elect our president? Okay, so that got a big smile from Secretary Clinton. So we'll start with you, ma'am.
Well, I would start by abolishing the Electoral College.
Yes.
Which I don't think would be a surprise to anyone. I actually called for abolishing it back in 2000 when, as we can remember, Al Gore won the popular vote, and then the Supreme Court issued an absolutely horrendous decision that turned the election the other way. So it's a remnant of our past. It is a reflection of an unfortunate legacy from slaveholders and their desire to have more influence in national elections. So first and foremost, it's not going to happen anytime soon. I'm well aware of that, but it is a remnant that should be discarded, and we should be, doing what I believe the Constitution requires, other than the Electoral College, and certainly legislation and a lot of other decisions call for, and that is one person, one vote. And the sooner we can get to that, the more people will be able to trust our elections, because right now there are so many efforts to shrink the electorate, to try to make it difficult for people to vote. As Emmy was saying, in Onward Together, we have a big project going on with Democracy Docket to bring lawsuits to try to end the tactics of voter suppression by, setting up long lines because of too limited sites for voting, of trying to eliminate or shrink early voting, of trying to make mail-in voting difficult, even in the midst of a pandemic. So one person, one vote, making it as easy and accessible as possible for every single American to be able to vote, and automatic voter registration at the age of 18. So there's some of the things that I think would make a difference.
Well, I certainly strongly agree with all of that. I also have some views on the process for tabulating caucus results in Iowa. I'm not sure there'll ever be
I could talk offline about that, Pete.
But something you said I thought was so important, that idea of trust. I've been thinking and writing a lot about this subject of trust. And, one of the things that makes it harder to ask people to turn out and vote is when something like the Electoral College distorts the ability of those votes to count. There are some places I was campaigning. This was a bit of a hard sell, but it's just clearly a fair way to go. It doesn't even benefit small states. Some states get more attention, but for folks who live in those states, I would argue that the biggest impact the Electoral College has had on your life is not the number of campaign rallies that might have come through your area. It's the fact that we had a President Bush instead of a President Gore, and it's the fact that today we live under President Trump instead of under President Hillary Clinton. Those are the ways and the decisions that have been made that would have been so much better. Those are the real life impacts of something as arcane as the Electoral College. And when we talk about a popular vote, and it may take a generation to deliver a constitutional amendment on that, but there's a compact among states that's gathering steam that would have the same effect. Whether we're talking about districting reform, ending Citizens United, any of these unsexy process issues. The reality is they are among the most important issues of our time, because it's the issue of how we deal with all our other issues. And every time you look at one of these seemingly very dry process issues, from the Electoral College to the fact that DC is not a state, almost every time you also see the systematic disempowerment of Black and brown Americans, or younger Americans, or both. Just one more reason why we've got to pay attention to the basics here in our democracy.
And so you both mentioned several reforms that we know that we need, but we find ourselves tonight 110 days out from Election Day. So we are in crunch time. And so Roseanne from Wheaton had a question. How can we guarantee that we will be able to vote from home? We're hearing a lot about the U.S. Postal Service closing. How might that impact the November election? Pete, do you want to start?
Sure, it's so important that we make it possible for everyone to be able to safely vote. And I do worry about the political motivations behind these attacks on the Postal Service. It's one of the backbones of just the basic development of modernity in America, but also a very important way for us to vote. And by the way, if anybody wonders if vote by mail is legitimate, it was good enough for the president, it's good enough for the vice president, and it was good enough for people like me in uniform to vote from places like Afghanistan. Surely it's good enough for all of us. Now, we can't just stop there, because we know that there also have to be safe ways to vote in person. The last thing we'd want to do is disenfranchise people in states that are going through this change so quickly by only having an option to vote by mail and not having an in-person vote. And if folks on the call want to know how you can help, in addition to supporting organizations like Fair Fight and some of the other efforts that Secretary Clinton and Onward Together are teaming up with for voter protection, consider simply becoming a poll worker, something that's, we don't really, for some reason, my generation hasn't done it as much. The simple reality is the elections in this country are largely run by retirees and volunteers. And one of the reasons why we will have fewer polling places this time around may just be a shortage of people able to go out and work. So it's another example of a civic thing that you can do. You got to check your partisan hat at the door when you do it, but a really important way to help. We have got to make sure, I mean, America is the most consequential democracy on earth in the last 2,000 years. If we can't run an efficient election in a time of crisis, that's not just bad news for America, it's bad news for democracy.
Oh, I want to say amen. Amen to that. And I want to stress the point that Pete made, which may sound, not as, not as significant, but when it really is all said and done, it is, and that is poll workers, because a lot of the people who historically have been poll workers, certainly where I have voted over the years, have been retirees and older people. And a lot of them are worried about going out of their homes. They want to vote by mail, and they don't want to go to the polling place because they're worried about their own well-being. So, maybe that's something that Win the Era and Onward Together can work on together, and that is helping to recruit more younger poll workers, because you can't have polling places if you don't have people running those locations. The other point that I would like to underscore really goes to this whole question about how we're going to ensure vote by mail. There are a couple of standards that Stacey Abrams and Fair Fight and Mark Elias and Democracy Docket and Onward Together, we're all working on. Number one, states should provide prepaid postage because this is a civic responsibility. Number two, any ballot that is postmarked by election day, on election day, should count. Unfortunately, we are worried, as Pete said, about the reliability of our postal service now, because it's not a coincidence that Trump has removed the leadership and installed one of his big contributors to run the postal service, because they want to slow it down. They want to make it cumbersome and difficult. And sadly, people who have every right to vote by mail, like the president himself and so many others, should be able to rely on the Postal Service delivering that ballot. And so we want to be sure that if it's postmarked on election day, even if it arrives afterwards, it is still going to count. So there's some very common sense changes that many states are making, but unfortunately, a lot of lawsuits are being brought to try to require that other states make them. And for those of you in your state, check to see what the rules are. Find out whether it's going to be possible for you to have the vote by mail option, and also early voting. We need more places for early voting because some people really want to vote in person. That's what makes them feel like their vote will count. So we should have, both options available, and be part of, raising, this concern, and think about becoming a poll worker at your local poll, because that is going to be so important in this election. My view very quickly is that the only way Trump can win under these circumstances is if they suppress enough votes, they make your vote not count, they lose your vote in the mail, they make it difficult for you to get out and vote, and they flood the the online world with misinformation and disinformation to try to discourage people from voting. So we can't let any of that happen, and vote by mail is one of the key pillars of making sure that it doesn't.
Well, you both mentioned a few priorities: postage paid return ballots, mandatory early voting periods. The House passed something called the HEROES Act in mid-May, and it is sitting waiting for Mitch McConnell to act. And so we're heading back to Washington next week to make another push for that legislation to move forward to fully fund USPS. And so I know that we can get it done with your help, with the help of the American people, so that we can protect our right to vote in this upcoming election. So the next question we have is from Nicole and Michael in New York. How can the United States reclaim a leadership role in the world with respect to tackling climate change? What would you do if you were leading diplomatic efforts in a Biden administration? So let's start with Secretary Clinton. You've been leading these diplomatic efforts, ma'am, and so where should he start?
Well, thank you so much, Nicole and Michael. And I think Vice President Biden has laid out a really ambitious climate change policy proposal. And I hope everybody will go to his website and take a look at it. But just in general, he has said he's going to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord immediately. You know, because Trump took us out. We are literally the only country in the world that is not a party any longer to an agreement that we helped to start negotiating back in 2009, going forward from there. And rejoining the climate agreement will give the United States back the standing and the leverage to work with other countries like China and India, who are facing some very difficult choices about cutting their own emissions. But in addition to the international work that we need to get back into and lead, the United States has to be a model to set examples about how this will work. And I thought Vice President Biden was right on target when he said the other day that when he thinks about climate change, unlike Trump, he doesn't think of the word hoax, he thinks of the word jobs. We can create millions of jobs. Right now, there are more workers in solar energy than there are in coal. And we could double, triple, quadruple the numbers in all kinds of clean energy projects with the help and support of the federal government. So I think Joe Biden is really absolutely on the mark about what we need to do internationally, because clearly the United States cannot do this alone. We have to work with others, but also what we have to do at home to demonstrate our commitment once and for all for tackling the threat of climate change.
I think all of that captures so well what needs to happen and why it's so important to get Vice President Biden elected. The only thing I could add is that I also sense an opportunity here, since America is struggling to be trusted in the world and respected in the world the way we were when Secretary Clinton was leading our diplomacy and President Obama was leading our country. The way we've been really in the whole post-war period, or most of it, we've seen that erode. We're not even in the top 25 most trusted countries in the world right now. And I've thought about how you build trust as a country. Of course, the main way you do it is over a long period of time, being credible and reliable. But there are some ways to earn trust quickly, and it's usually to come through in a meaningful way in an emergency. That's part of how America came to command trust before. We've got an emergency on our hands. And so not only do we need to deal with climate in order to secure our own future, but if America were to authentically lead on climate change, it's probably the best chance we have to also restore our credibility among the countries around the world. So to me, leading the world in doing this and doing this right here at home, they go hand in hand, and they're important not just for confronting our climate challenge, but for seeing America play that leadership role once more.
Oh, spot on, spot on, spot on. Okay, so as we close out this segment, we have a lot of students and young people on the Zoom call today. Emily from Birmingham, Alabama. Happy birthday, Emily. And Alex from Samish, Washington, both asked, what was your first experience in politics like? And what advice do you have for young people who want to get involved in politics, but they're just not quite sure how to do so?
Well, my first, excuse me, my first experiences in politics were pretty humbling. I was home on break from school. I'd been studying international relations and things like that, and the local congressional campaign of Joe Donnelly, who went on to become a member of Congress and then a senator, had a spot for me to help, and I thought I could I could really help on these policy issues. And my first week, the campaign manager said, okay, there's this town called 12 Mile, and we need you to take balloons there. There's going to be a parade. And they actually have what's called the 12 Mile 500, which is kind of patterned after the Indy 500, except it's lawnmowers, riding lawnmowers that they kind of soup up. If you disconnect the blades, you can go really fast in those things. So this was, I think, a healthy education for me in all of the different things that are involved in campaigning. And that the most important thing, if you want to be involved in a campaign, is to just figure out where help is needed rather than your own idea of why you might be needed, but just to ask around where you can help. The other thing I would urge for younger people is certainly don't wait to get involved. Don't wait for anybody to come to you. Don't wait for anybody to tell you that you're old enough or you're established enough, especially right now with issues from gun violence to racial justice to climate change. It's actually been the voices of young people, some of them not even old enough to vote. I mean, the most prominent climate activist in the world is a Swedish teenager who I don't think if she were a US citizen would even be old enough to vote yet, and yet are having such impact because of the arresting power of the moral authority of young people, looking in the eyes of anybody old enough to be in a position of authority and saying, what are you doing to keep me safe or make my life better? So I hope Emily and Alex, that you both get involved and stay that way. Find somebody that you believe in or an organization that is working on something you believe in. And if you can't, that's your cue to go ahead and create something on your own.
Lawnmower races. Love that. Ma'am, turn it over to you.
Well, I think the first real involvement I had was in 1968 when some friends of mine in college and I decided we wanted to do our part to try to act against the Vietnam War. And we decided to work in New Hampshire for Gene McCarthy, who at that time was the anti-war candidate. So that was my first introduction to a political campaign, walking into the headquarters, being sent out with, door knockers, trying to talk to people about why we were doing it. And, it was a great experience. And I worked in the 1972 presidential campaign, registering voters in Texas. And you learn a lot about yourself, and you learn to be creative and quite flexible and trying to make arguments and reach people on behalf of the candidate that you're working for. I never thought I would run myself. I always thought that I would be, on the sidelines working to help elect other people. And it was a great experience. And I highly recommend getting involved in a campaign. And as Pete said, you never know what you're going to be asked to do. But, I've been in some incredibly interesting situations across our country and across New York when I finally did decide to run myself. So it's a terrific continuing education, and you meet friends that you will keep for a lifetime, like we saw with Emmy and Michael, who worked on my campaign, and then Michael went on to work for Pete's campaign. It's a terrific experience, and so I just can't recommend it enough. And if you don't find somebody you want to work for when you meet the age requirement, like Lauren and others, run yourself and get out there and be prepared to make your case and do everything you can to convince people to trust you and support you.
Yes, run, run, run. So now it's time to have a little fun before we wrap up for the evening. We're going to do a quick lightning round of questions. So let's be sure to keep our responses brief. First, I'll go to you, Secretary Clinton, and then to you, Pete. Are you ready?
I guess.
I think that's a yes. Okay, great. So first, what book are you reading?
Oh, I'm reading the new Daniel Silva spy novel.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Nice.
I like mysteries, and I like spy novels.
Fabulous. Mayor Pete.
Nice. I just got my hands on this book by Vivek Murthy. He was the Surgeon General in the Obama administration, and it's called Together. It's basically about the health consequences of loneliness and the importance of connection. So I'm really looking forward to getting into that.
Amazing. Okay, Secretary Clinton, what show, TV show are you binging right now?
Oh, I'm so far behind that I'm just catching up on some shows like Mrs. Maisel.
Nice.
All my friends told me you got to see it. It's a great period piece. So I'm finally able to do that.
Wonderful. Mayor Pete.
We're about halfway through Schitt's Creek. I feel the same way. We're a few years behind. So all the shows my friends were talking about 2 or 3 years ago, we're plunging headlong into them now.
Well, I'm taking notes now, so I'm behind even you both. So here we go. Okay, since you're both the last two winners of the Iowa caucuses, what was your favorite thing to eat at the Iowa State Fair?
Oh God. I really liked the pork chop on a stick.
Yes.
It's just such an Iowa thing. And so, yeah, that was my, I think, favorite at the time.
Amazing. Pete.
Hard to pick. The pork chop on a stick was really good. There's this thing called a bacon ball BLT, which was like, I don't know, there was some cheese involved, and then they made a BLT out of it or kind of around it. I see every public health. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I made the mistake of eating that after the deep fried Oreos. And so there's a sequence you got to follow when you're doing the state fair that I didn't quite understand and was definitely feeling later in the day.
Yeah, a little heartburn there. Okay, so what's the most outlandish conspiracy theory you read about yourself? Secretary Clinton.
Oh my gosh, where do you start? We don't have enough time. It's a hard choice between Pizzagate, which was terrible because a very disturbed young man ended up shooting up the poor pizza restaurant, and the very lengthy list of people that I've murdered or had murdered. So I have a hard time choosing between them.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mayor Pete.
Yeah, I had no idea how many and how varied. I still haven't caught up to the secretary's level, but we had one about that I had been arrested for murdering dogs as a teenager. Somebody went so far as to create a fake South Bend Tribune back issue front cover. I thought that was pretty elaborate. Luckily, the actual South Bend Tribune did a story about how you could tell it was fake. That was something.
Okay, our last one. If you're anything like me, you're daydreaming about pre-quarantine, post-quarantine. So what's the thing you miss most? Secretary Clinton.
I miss seeing my friends. I miss going out to dinner. I miss traveling. I miss going on vacation with my family. So I hope that we'll be able to look forward to that sometime in the next few months.
Yes, ma'am. Pete.
Yeah, same thing. It's we've all gotten pretty good at this virtual thing, but there's nothing like just being in a room with people you enjoy spending time with, and I'm really looking forward to that as soon as it's safe again. That and there's this burger place downtown that I got to get back to, but all in good time.
That's right. So our final question to close the evening is from Gayatri in Edison, New Jersey. And she says, what gives you hope for the future of this country amidst the pandemic, troubled economy, the climate crisis, and political polarization? Pete, let's start with you.
Well, the biggest thing that gives me hope is the strength of support that there is for change. We see it with everybody who's part of this event right now. I see it every time we do an event for the candidates we're backing, like you, Congresswoman Underwood. We see it in the people who are taking to the streets insisting that America become better than we've been. We're so much better than this as a country. And I'm convinced that the American people will compel the American system to listen and to improve, and it can't come soon enough.
Yeah, I am fundamentally optimistic and hopeful, and in large measure because of young people, the energy of young people, the determination. We've seen it in the streets protesting the terrible killings that unfortunately we still are dealing with in our country, and the underpinnings of systemic racism that have still got to be tackled in a moral reckoning. We've seen it with climate change, and we've seen it in so many other ways where young people are ready to make sure their voices are heard. And I would just add that peaceful protest is a big part of how you get a message across and get change to happen. But protest and vote, because if you look at leaders like like Lauren Underwood, she didn't get there by accident. She worked hard for it, and enough people believed in her that they actually took, their responsibility as citizens seriously, and they voted for her, and we want that to happen again. But if you don't vote, if you leave it to somebody else, if you get discouraged, if you, get a little disappointed in a particular candidate and therefore think, well, maybe I won't actually turn out and vote, you're basically writing a blank check to people you don't agree with and who don't have your best interests in mind. So I'm optimistic about the energy I see among young people, and I'm just hoping that that energy shows up in November to make sure we keep the House and we get the Senate and we change the White House and we elect a lot of terrific people, a lot of young people, a lot of people of color up and down the ballot, because that's what will help us move in the direction that Pete mentioned, where we can try to make America what we know we are capable of being together.
Well, I'd like to certainly thank you both for such a fabulous conversation this evening, Secretary Hillary Clinton, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, and these two wonderful organizations that you started, Onward Together and Win the Era. You continue to inspire us all. Thank you to the 2,000 people who joined us tonight in supporting both of these groups. We're so grateful for all that you do. Stay safe, everybody, and go vote.
Thank you all. Stay safe.
Thank
Stay
you.
healthy.